All right, so we'll start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in on this workshop on hidden grief, understanding loss we overlook. My name is Kanika Mohan. I'm a counselor here at MindTribe. I have experience of around 2.5 years and dealing with cases related to anxiety, emotional regulation, grief, stress, to name a few. I'm also joined by my co-host, Ocean. Ocean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Kanika. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ocean Gupta, and I work as a full-time psychologist at MindTribe Healthcare by Dr. Prerna Kohli. I have previously worked with clients with self-esteem issues, relationship issues, emotional dysregulation, and grief. I'll be the co-host for today's workshop, and I'll be addressing all your queries over the chat box. I hope my colleagues' insights can be helpful for all of you today, and we welcome you. Hoping we have an interactive session today.
Right, thank you, Ocean. Before moving forward, we have a few ground rules. First, please keep your cameras and mic off throughout the workshop. If you have a question or a comment, then you can use the raise hand feature, and I'll get back and I'll get to you to let you speak. And you can also use the chat box if you have any question. And like Ocean mentioned, she would be answering any queries over the chat box. Okay, so we'll begin now. This is a brief overview of what this workshop will cover. So we'll talk about what exactly hidden grief is, how guilt can impact it, and ways to move forward from that. Basically, self-care techniques and some coping techniques that I will be sharing in a bit more detail with you guys, along with the case study, a takeaway activity, and obviously the conclusion and summary of this workshop. So I would like to ask you all about something that you've held onto for a long time. It could be a memory, an object, a feeling. You can use the raise hand feature or use the chat box. Someone mentioned anger is a feeling that they've held for a long time. Okay. A specific memory. Not being loved and cared by my parents. The feeling of boredom, guilt. A feeling of sadness due to the death of my grandmother, regret, not understanding my feelings and past memories, childhood bullies, anger, jealousy, guilt, failures, freedom, anger. These are all some great answers, everyone. Learned helplessness. All right, thank you for your answers. A lot of these things that we generally keep holding on can sometimes be associated with our guilt and with our grief, and we'll be exploring more of that throughout this workshop. So we'll start off with what we mean by the term grief. So grief is the experience of coping with loss. Most of us think of grief as happening in the painful period following the death of a loved one, but grief can accompany any event that disrupts or challenges our sense of normalcy or ourselves. It's the loss of connections that define us. It can take different forms. One such form is ambiguous, which means that there's a lack of closure around the loss. So, for example, grieving a friendship that has fizzled out with time. Another is anticipatory, which involves grieving before the actual loss happens. For example, grieving a friendship, anticipatory could be could be when you find out that somebody you are close to might have a terminal illness. So kind of anticipating that you would have to lose them one day would be an example of anticipatory grief. It can include the actual fear of potential loss of health, independence, a body part, financial stability, choice, or mental function. Then we have normal grief, which includes the common feelings, behaviors, and reactions to loss. We will be covering a bit more of this in the future slides. Then complicated grief. So in real time, all grief is complex, but in certain circumstances, grief can evolve into something even more complex. So complicated or prolonged grief often involves challenging circumstances or extreme symptoms that interfere with our daily life over a very long period of time. And then finally, we have disenfranchised grief, which is our main topic for today. This is basically grief over any loss that is not validated or recognized. Those affected by this type of grief do not feel the freedom to openly acknowledge their grief and engage in the grieving process. So this type of grief can occur in various situations. Some of the examples are mentioned in this slide. It can include unfulfilled dreams, loss of a relationship, whether it's a friendship that hasn't worked out or a breakup with a romantic partner, or even family ties that have been cut off, job loss, loss of a pet, role transitions, which are basically changes in your life that are either expected or unexpected, and kind of mourning over the life that you previously had before that change. These are all experience on a common basis. However, we don't often get to properly these situations. We don't really see it as something to be grieved, just a normal part of life. So some of the reasons we are not able to cope with this type of grief is the lack of social support. When grief is not recognized, it often means a lack of support from family, friends, the community. This can leave individuals feeling alone in their sorrow without the necessary emotional scaffolding to process the loss. Many people also fear burdening people with their problems or people not understanding exactly what they're going through. There's also stigmatization. Certain types of loss, such as those involving addiction, suicide, miscarriage, may carry a societal stigma with it. This can further alienate grieving individuals who might fear judgment or blame. It's also linked with cultural expectations. So, for example, grieving over a breakup is not something that maybe your parents or your family might understand. They would just kind of expect you to move on. Then ambiguous loss. So disenfranchised grief is often tied to ambiguous losses, which are situations where the loss is unclear or unresolved. So, for example, the disappearance of a loved one or cognitive decline seen in dementia. These ambiguous losses can make it difficult for individuals to find closure, which kind of contributes to this. Then these reasons can lead to an impact on our physical and mental health. So loss is an extreme stressor that can take a major physical toll on our body. Grief can overwork your nervous system. It can cause a weakened immune system that makes it easier for you to get sick. Certain symptoms of it physically affecting you is fatigue, headaches, insomnia or hypersomnia, which is either the lack of sleep or too much sleep, pain, weight changes, digestive issues. Then without social validation, people may feel alone in their mourning. This can lead to sadness, anxiety, depression. It can also lead to psychosomatic disorders, which is when an individual experiences symptoms of a physical illness, but they don't actually have a physical basis for that illness to be there. And also, it can cause low self-esteem. Grief can make it hard to concentrate or complete tasks and carry on with day-to-day activities. It can lead to you feeling very irritable. It can lead to hopelessness, that somebody had mentioned in the chat, confusion, a sense of isolation, loss of focus, and procrastinating tasks that you need to do. So this slide is basically just questions on self-reflection. These are the questions that you can ask yourself to understand your emotions and thoughts around disenfranchised or hidden grief that you are experiencing. I'll pause here for around 2 minutes so that you can go through these questions. And if anybody feels comfortable, they can share by raising their hand or write it in the chat box. Once you've gone through the questions, you can also give me a thumbs up so I can move on to the next slide. Somebody asked, does this need to be done daily or weekly? This can be a one-time thing. It's something that, you can do just once, kind of reflecting on how you're feeling, what emotions you're going through because of that situation. So you don't need to do it a daily or on a weekly basis, but do it once to kind of understand where exactly you are. I think somebody raised their hand. If they want to speak, they can go ahead. All right. Somebody mentioned hidden grief as confusion. It signifies lack of agency, life not lived. Yes, it can definitely be confusion, especially around circumstances where you haven't gotten closure because of something. It's all right if you don't have the answers to all of them. It can be quite hard kind of understanding your emotion when it comes to grief. So it's something that you can take your time trying to understand. And if you still don't have the answers, you can always kind of talk to someone. You can always avail counseling facilities if you know it's bothering you, but you don't know how to put it into words or understand your own situation. So you don't have to know the answer to all of them, but you can, try to figure out by reflecting a bit, introspecting a bit whenever you have the time on this. So I'll be moving on. So let's take a moment to talk about guilt, something many people feel when grieving. So grief research depicts a direct relationship between grief and guilt. When people feel they don't deserve to grieve or aren't given space to express it, guilt often creeps in. I shouldn't be this upset. It wasn't even a real relationship. That's an example of how it can manifest or how it kind of sounds like. One of the biggest challenges in experiencing guilt in relation to grief is that people tend to ruminate regarding choices about things that they did or did not do. And they believe that these acts contributed to the loss. To better depict this, we have a case study of Raj. I'll be reading it and then I'll ask you some questions based on it. So Raj is 35. He lost his estranged father to a sudden heart attack after over a decade of no contact. Instead of feeling the overwhelming grief his family expected, he was conflicted, regretting that he never reconciled, yet also feeling a quiet sense of relief. He questioned whether he had the right to grieve at all, especially when his emotions didn't match those of his siblings who were openly mourning. Struggling to express sorrow, he withdrew from his family, avoided conversations about his father, and felt guilty for not grieving enough. So my question to you is, what emotions do you think Raj is experiencing in this situation?
Guilt and shame.
Yes, guilt. Definitely he's feeling guilt. Regret. Yes. Guilt for sure. Guilt and regret. Yes. Shame. I guess in a sense there could be shame, but it's not very explicit that he is feeling shame in this situation. I would say more of a confusion given their complicated history. So confusion, regret, guilt, those are some things that he is primarily feeling. Right. My second question is, how does this guilt manifest in his grief? Yes, Rashmi, you're right. Sadness is also there. Yes, Priya said suppressing his emotion, definitely. Isolation, yes. Avoiding his family. Not accepting his own emotions, not knowing how to process, going into a shell, definitely. Bottling up. Right, definitely. Many of you got it right already. Another thing that self-blaming. I mean, yes, I guess the self-blame is in relation to why am I not grieving as much as my siblings are. Another way that his guilt is manifesting in this is avoiding conversations about his father, so avoiding the subject at hand, basically, which is again a part of suppression, but also distinct in itself of not talking about his father, completely avoiding the topic. Comparing to others and letting the locus of control out of him. Yes, he is comparing to his siblings and kind of focusing on their emotions and how his emotions don't match theirs. Definitely, that was a very good observation. Right, thank you for your answers, everyone. I'll move on. So through the case study, we already saw how, in a lot of sense, how guilt can look like in grief. Many of you already kind of identified it correctly, but we'll just kind of talk about it a bit more. So people who cling to the belief that they should have done things differently often feel that they should be punished for their actions or inactions. This typically results in self-isolation and a reduction in self-care. Unfortunately, healing from loss is less likely to begin with these self-destructive behaviors in place, despite, people thinking that ruminating could help them, or wishing that they could have done things in a different way. Other signs, include decline in self-care, negative self-talk, blame, sadness, regret. So for example, if we talk about a friendship breakup, self-blame could be something like, I should have been there for them more, I should have reached out more, I could have done that better to keep our friendship. Then avoidance of reminders would be not going to places that they have visited with them frequently. And it can also manifest itself in the form of perfectionism. So with other friendships, or relationships, they could try to compensate. So they may either become too clingy if they felt like they weren't interactive enough in their previous friendship or relationship, which could lead to problems in that relationship as well. Then this guilt can start manifesting as anxiety, shame, sadness, a feeling of failure, unworthiness, like we've seen in the case of Raj, and many of you had pointed out as well. So up till now, does anybody have any question, any comment that they want to ask in regards to this? Any clarification of any sorts? If not, you can give me a thumbs up and we'll move on. All right, perfect. So now we'll go more into what normal grief generally looks like and what the grieving process for any form of grief should ideally be. Now, everyone deals with grief in their own way and in their own pace. There is no set duration for grieving, and people generally move through each stage at varying rates. However, we generally see that grief largely resolves after 1 to 2 years. This timeline again can be different for everyone, but ideally 1 to 2 years is like the optimal time that it takes for people to kind of come to terms with it and get to the point of acceptance. Additionally, rather than experiencing a steady decline in grief, a person's emotions tend to fluctuate over time and come in waves. It is common for reactions to grief to resurge after many years in response to triggers, which may include birthdays, special events, holidays, or songs that they might have heard with that person. Then we'll revisit the 5 stages of grief. I'm sure many of you have already kind of heard of this, but we'll go a bit more in detail. So the first stage is denial. It entails refuting the reality of the loss or any associated feeling. Once an individual accepts reality, they can move forward through the healing process. Then we have anger. During this stage, an individual may direct their anger towards the circumstances surrounding the grief or the people involved. An example could be the anger we feel towards an ex after a breakup. So this replaces the numbness of the shock and denial. It is important that we kind of address the anger in this stage and kind of just process our emotions through this stage. Then we have bargaining, which involves thoughts such as, I will do anything if you take away the pain. The stage may come at any point within the grieving process, and guilt is generally seen more commonly in this phase of the grieving process. Then we have depression. Then at this stage, a person can experience feelings of emptiness and intense sadness. They may also withdraw from daily activities and things they once enjoyed. The stage is quite difficult to go through, but it is a very necessary step to kind of go through it to finally be able to heal. Then acceptance. This is the final stage of the grieving process. Acceptance doesn't really mean that people suddenly start feeling okay about the loss. Rather, it means that they realize the loss is their new reality. They understand that while life will not continue as it did before, it will go on. This stage may involve reorganizing your roles and forming new relationships and kind of moving forward with your life. I think I saw a comment where somebody asked me to explain bargaining again. So bargaining is basically a stage where you would do anything for like the loss or the pain to go away. So for example, in the case of like a breakup, you might, text your ex again and just kind of ask them if you can get back together again and apologize to them frequently and be like, I'll do like anything for our relationship to get back together. So that's basically bargaining. So recently, researchers have added 2 more stages to this process. The first one is shock. So this is, you can consider this as like the stage that comes before denial. It involves a numb disbelief in response to the news of a loss. It may serve as an emotional buffer to prevent someone from feeling overwhelmed. Like I mentioned, this is the first stage now in the new model before denial. So you will feel shock and then you might be in denial about the situation. And then the other is testing. So testing is the process of trying to find solutions that offer a meaning, that offers meaning to the person or offers a means of dealing with the loss. Someone may drift in and out of other grieving stages during this time, and this typically occurs after the depressive stage and before acceptance. So you're basically just trying out new things. So, post the loss of a relationship, you might, have a few rebounds, or you might get back on dating apps, or you will, try to engage in new hobbies or try to pick up new projects or anything to kind of cope with the situation. Then when these stages are not followed properly, or we end up getting stuck in one stage for a prolonged period of time, getting professional help can be of really big help. So some forms of professional help include one-on-one counseling or therapy, where you can get personalized support for what you are going through. Individual therapy can also help deal with other problems that you might be facing alongside the grief. And then grief counselors help specifically with grief and loss. It's more focused towards dealing with just ideally the loss and the circumstances surrounding the loss, as compared to individual therapy that can, take up like other issues. Like if you are feeling anxious about something unrelated, they will also take that up. Then you can also go through group therapy, wherein alongside professionals, you get to meet and interact with people going through similar experiences. There are also support groups that can be useful. These are basically peer-led spaces for sharing and connecting with people who have gone through a similar experience as you. So the main difference between group therapy and support groups is that group therapies are led by professionals and support groups are generally led by peers or social workers. So these are some of the self-care methods that you can try to help cope with this grief. This slide is just a preview of the different methods. I'll be going into them one by one and giving some more specific tips on how to go about this. But before we do that, we have a quick ad break. So just like on YouTube, if it's free, there's an ad. So this presentation is just letting you know what exactly one-on-one counseling is. So it's a personalized, confidential session between a client and a trained therapist. People generally have this misconception about therapy that you only go when things are really bad. But you can also go to therapy just for personal growth, gaining insights on your thoughts, behaviors, for problem solving, for issues like anxiety, stress, relationship problems, and also for better goal setting, working towards any professional, personal goals that you have with the help of a counselor. Right. So one of the misconceptions is counseling is only for those who are sick, when in reality it is for anyone who wants to be their best version, for better relationship, more friends, academic success, career advancement. So why should you choose MindTribe for counseling? We are a team of highly trained counselors. We have affordable charges which range from $800 to $2,400 depending on the seniority of the counselor. Our first session is priced at $99. and we have affordable packages so that people can invest in their mental health. If you have any questions related to this about how to avail counseling services at MindTribe, I'll just pause here for a minute and you can ask, or you can also put it in the chat box and Ocean will get back to you regarding it. I had a question about how counselors grow themselves without seeking therapy. That's a good question. So basically, one thing personally that I have dealt with while studying psychology is that when you read a lot about like interventions and therapies and how to like go about it, you also learn about like the advantages of certain methods. Like we basically would tell you in a counseling session, but we learn about it essentially ourselves. So it's something that we also try to like apply to ourselves. Like all of the things that I'm going to tell you, not just pertaining to grief, but also related to other things, are things that you can just do on a normal day-to-day life, in your day-to-day life. So we also try to incorporate that. We understand, like, we have like that insight to know like what things are kind of bothering us and how we can go about it. So that's one way. You want to know the difference between 800 session and 2000 session in terms of counselor experience? Yeah, the prices vary depending on the counselor experiences. So generally the senior psychologists and specialist psychologists in our team, they have sessions which are priced at 2000, while psychologists and all of that, like our prices kind of go down depending on our seniority level. All right, so any other questions, you can drop it in the chat box and we will get back to you regarding it. Right, so first we'll talk about journaling. The act of gratitude plays an important role in psychological well-being. So regular expression of gratitude can lead to increased feelings of happiness, as well as reports of higher life satisfaction, meaningfulness, and productivity. When dealing with grief, this can remind us about what we haven't lost and help us be thankful for what we have. So practicing gratitude, it doesn't erase the pain per se, but it does help balance it out by remembering what we do have. So on this slide, there are some prompts that you can use for gratitude journaling. This is something that you can do either on a daily basis or a weekly basis. It depends on how much time you're willing to devote. Journaling ideally is a very good habit to have. So if it's something that you can do on a daily basis, that would be very good. So some of the things that you can like write about is a good thing that happened to me today, something that I accomplished today, someone I was thankful for, something fun that happened today, something that you learned, the best part of your day, and 5 things that I'm grateful for. There is also a behavioral component of gratitude journaling, wherein rather than just writing down 5 things I'm grateful for or 5 people that I'm grateful for, you can also reach out to those people and sort of thank them. It will also make them feel good and you would also feel happy knowing that you've kind of made someone's day. So you can try these out at your own pace. Then we have planning. So having a set routine can help us get back to normalcy after experiencing any form of loss. Making a timetable to incorporate all the tasks that you have to do, having a daily planner to note down important tasks to be done. And then there are templates and journals now that have habit trackers, which can track daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly goals. So these are all things that you can consider. And then finding time in the day to dedicate to your hobbies and things you enjoy can also help. There are many instances where people don't have a particular hobby, and that's perfectly fine. You can always try to reflect on things that you may have enjoyed when you were a child and try to get back into those. There can also be things that you may have found interesting at some point. You can try to find videos or find tutorials related to that and get into it gradually, like taking out an hour of a day or half an hour of a day to just kind of color, draw, sing, take pictures, whatever you prefer. Then, like we have discussed in the previous slides, grief can have a physical impact on our bodies. It can lead to insomnia, hypersomnia, increase and decreased appetite, weight loss, to name a few things. So to cope with these physical impact, maintaining a healthy lifestyle becomes very important. People tend to neglect their personal hygiene when they're grieving. So we have to be a little bit mindful of that. So, just kind of doing your normal getting up, taking a shower, and just kind of forcing yourself in a way to kind of go back into that normal headspace and do the things that you usually do, then getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep is essential. And eating a balanced diet, eating things that are good for you, which have the relevant minerals, vitamins, minerals, trying to avoid a lot of junk food, and then staying hydrated. So around 2 liters of water a day is good for you. So just kind of incorporating that in your daily routine. Then breathing exercise like mindfulness techniques help with emotional regulation. It can help with the negative feelings when you're experiencing loss. So the activity that I mentioned here is the 3-part breath technique. We'll do this in the session together. So please feel free to join in, or if you feel like you just want to listen to it and kind of note down the steps, then you can try it in your own time. I will be sending a video of this, like how to go about it, a guided video regarding this after the workshop on the group. So if you're not able to catch it, don't worry. I will be sending the resources related to this on the group later. So for those of you who are going to try it out, we'll start by getting into a comfortable position. So you can start by simply observing your natural breath, how you inhale and exhale without trying to change it. If your mind gets distracted, just notice the thoughts and gently let them go, bringing your focus back to your breath. You can start taking slow, deep breaths through your nose. As you inhale, fill your belly with air, expanding it like a balloon. And when you exhale, empty all the air from your belly through your nose, drawing your belly button toward your spine. So this is the first part. On the next inhale, fill your belly with air. When it's full, take a little more breath, expanding your ribs so they widen apart. On the exhale, release the air starting from the ribs, letting them come back together. Then from your belly, drawing the navel towards your spine. This was the second part. Now inhale deeply into your belly and ribs. After that, take a small extra sip of air, letting it fill your upper chest, all the way up to your collarbone. Let the area around your heart expand. On the exhale, release the breath starting from the chest, allowing the heart center to drop, then from the ribs, letting them come together, and finally from the belly, drawing the navel toward the spine. This was the third part of the exercise, and you can continue to do this till you start feeling a bit more relaxed. So just to explain what exactly happened for the people who might have missed out. So basically the 3-part breath exercises focuses on your belly, on your chest, and kind of like upper to the upper, so your belly, your midsection, and your chest. These are the 3 areas where you kind of just have to do deep breathing and make it feel like those parts of the body are expanding. And that sort of helps in relaxation. It's basically a type of a yoga technique that can help you with that. Again, I will be sending a guided video on how to go about this later in the chat. So if you didn't understand the explanation, don't worry. For the people who have tried to do this exercise, could you give me a thumbs up if it made you feel different or if it made you feel more relaxed? If you want to talk about it in the chat as well. All right. Right. So the next self-care tip would be maintaining physical health fitness. It can play a very crucial part in emotional regulation as well as coping with loss. So ideally, we should try to get 30 minutes of activity every day. It can feel like a lot, 30 minutes in a day, especially if you aren't somebody who really commits to physical fitness on an everyday basis, which is perfectly fine. You can start with more small daily targets. So you can start with maybe doing like a 10-minute workout session or, taking a walk or something. Physical fitness doesn't always necessarily mean going to the gym or, running or those type of things. You can also do activities that require a bit of physical labor. So walking, gardening are a few examples that you can try in your own time and gradually kind of increase your time in doing that from maybe 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 15 and finally to 30. Right. So before continuing to our final self-care tip, I want to ask you all, if you could create a new ritual for a type of loss that often goes unrecognized, what would it be? Right. Someone asked, if someone is grieving and they are continuously having thoughts which are intrusive and draining, it can be difficult for them to sleep. How can we help them in getting a good 7 to 8 hours of sleep? That's a great question. So you are right. They might be overthinking. They might be ruminating about that. So all of the self-care techniques that I've kind of talked about, it's not that you have to do them all separately. You can kind of use them in accordance with each other. So if somebody is having a lot of intrusive thoughts, they can try journaling before going to bed. That's something that they can try out, kind of getting their thoughts out on paper. That's one technique. Another thing that they can do is just having a very specific nighttime or before going to sleep routine, because that routine can kind of help them or help their body recognize that, okay, we do this every day, we do this before going to sleep. So it will help them kind of recognize that it's time for that. Listening to more relaxing music. There are a lot of apps and stuff like that which have these videos or this music which can help them go to sleep or relax before going to sleep. That's something that they can try out. And overall, just trying out the breathing exercise that I just mentioned, or any form of meditation or any emotional regulation exercise before bed could help them kind of get their thoughts together and feel more emotionally relaxed before going to bed. Okay, so someone wrote having a routine, journaling, grief peer meet, self-care, physical therapy. Yes, a routine can kind of act as a ritual for you to be able to deal with your grief. That's a very good point. Then art activities. That's interesting. Traveling, visiting new places, definitely. Dancing, connecting with nature. Proper schedules involving communication with close ones to vent out emotions that cause guilt. Definitely. A cluster of thoughts doesn't allow sleep. Distraction makes it worse. Consistency and excessive takes up a lot of energy just to start. Definitely. So the whole point of all of I mentioned before, it's not just it's not just a physical exercise and not just to drain up your energy, but that energy that you are kind of putting into it, it kind of helps regulate a lot of your bodily functions as well as regulating your emotions. So having a routine, having physical exercise throughout the day also contributes to a better sleep cycle, because our body, once it has been active, also kind of will feel tired towards at night, so it kind of contributes to sleeping better. I hope that makes sense. Right, so I really like some of the answers of using art and dancing and visiting new places and having a routine as a part of a ritual. So our next self-care routine is to create a ritual for ourselves. So rituals help elevate the burden of grief after a major loss. They do this by promoting acceptance of the loss, emotional expression, and a feeling of control. Rituals help maintain a bond with what has been lost and provide an opportunity for reflecting on how to go forward. Carrying out a ritual connects a person to whatever they consider sacred, be it a higher power, a state of consciousness, or their most cherished values. So to be effective, a grief ritual should be tailored to your particular loss, belief system, and immediate environment. I'll be going over some of the steps that you can do while creating a ritual for yourself. So the first would be to choose a meaningful object. So grief rituals benefit from incorporating a meaningful physical object. So if it's possible, then you can select an object with a connection to your loss. So for example, if you are grieving the end of a job, you could choose an object from that role, maybe a pen, your ID card, a uniform, or a business card. If you aren't able to think of a physical object that is connected to your loss, you can select something with a symbolic value from the natural environment. It can be a rock, a flower, a seashell, or feather, anything that suits you. Then the next step would be to make it sacred. So rituals should have an element of sacredness to distinguish them from mundane activities such as, getting dressed, cleaning, driving to work. So you can try something like lighting a candle, visiting a special place in connection to maybe a relationship, reciting a prayer or mantra or intention are all good options. Then incorporating movement. So research suggests that connecting with your body can help with expressing and processing difficult emotions. This is one of the key benefits of a grief ritual. So incorporating movement into your grief ritual can make it an effective way to do this. So if you're grieving the loss of a friendship, then you can maybe have a bit of a walk down the memory lane before kind of doing your ritual, going to the places that you used to hang out and stuff like that. That's an example of it. Then interact with the chosen object. So rather than just having the object present with you, grief experts recommend using the object in some way. So this symbolizes moving the pain of grief to a place where it can be worked with and transformed. So for example, if you wrote a letter expressing your feelings about a relationship that ended, you could shred it and bury it as a way of releasing your emotions. If you choose a rock as your object, imagine your guilt or your anger being absorbed into it, and then you can either drop it in water or throw it in a place where, it doesn't potentially hurt anyone, but just throwing it in an open field to kind of let go of those negative thoughts that were bothering you. And the fifth and the final step is to create closure and repeat. So after performing your ritual, create a sense of closure before returning to your day. So some good options are, again, you can recite some positive affirmation, you can recite a mantra, you can pray, you can meditate, or you can extinguish a candle you lit to begin the ritual. This marks the end of your ritual and the return to your normal activities. This is also something that, you can do after a specific point. You can revisit these rituals and kind of do them again, or you can make it a thing you do after certain types of losses like breakups, loss of a relationship, or something like that. If you feel like whatever we have discussed so far applies to people you may know, you can follow these tips to support them. So the first is to validate their grief. So acknowledge their loss, even if society doesn't recognize it. Say things like, I know this is important to you and I'm here for you. Avoid minimizing statements like, at least, this didn't happen to you, or at least you were better off this way, or you should move on. Then listen without judgment. Let them share their feelings without rushing to fix or compare. Avoid giving unsolicited advice. Sometimes people just want to be heard. And then offer open-ended prompts like, would you like to talk about it? Or would you like to talk about the situation? Then recognize that grief looks different for everyone. Some may withdraw while others may seek distraction. Both are completely valid. People, like I said, express grief in a different way. Then understand that mixed emotions like relief, guilt, sadness are all normal. Let them grieve in their own way without the pressure to follow societal norms. You can offer practical support by asking them how you can help instead of assuming what they need. So small gestures like cooking a meal for them, helping them with tasks that they haven't been able to get around doing, or just sitting with them, even if it's just in comfortable silence, and just being physically there for them. Help them find a safe space to express their grief, encourage writing, art, rituals, memorials to process their emotions. And then you can also suggest support groups or therapy if you feel like they would be open to it. Basically, the key point is to just be patient, because grief doesn't have a timeline and everybody likes to express it in their own way. But you can always support them in the ways that I mentioned. Right, so we are nearing the end of this workshop. Before we finish off, I have this case study. So it's the case study of a 27-year-old woman who decides to live life on her terms, but sadly it's at the expense of losing her family's support. She regularly hears from her parents how they want her to come back home. Her siblings seem to be living the perfect life, settling down and starting a family, while she is in a new country trying to pave her own way. She gets emotional when she thinks about having no support right now. She struggles with it not being normal to go out and explore the world. Instead of getting married, having kids, and staying in one place, she wants to build her confidence but feels so overwhelmed by how alone she feels. So my question to you is, what situation is causing the woman grief? Sorry. Not getting support, no parental understanding and support, definitely. Not being financially independent and parents not supporting, comparison, parental expectations, isolation, feeling lonely, lack of emotional support, definitely. Those are definitely contributing to her grief. Comparison with sibling, no support, regular life, definitely. Those are all things that are contributing to her grief. Lack of parental support, definitely. The major aspect which is kind of causing her grief, alongside with what all you have mentioned, is also the fact that it is a role transition. So it means that she is moved to another country. She's in a completely new situation. Essentially, the change in her life is also causing her grief, because she went from being in her hometown, in her home country, to moving to another place. So she's also grieving the life that she has left behind, the relationships, even if they were not supportive, but relationships that she has left behind. Adjustment issues, definitely. Loss of emotionally supportive relationships, yes. Right. The second question is, what could she do to help cope with this grief? So kind of going through what all we've discussed so far, what do you think would help her in terms of dealing with her grief in this situation? Interact with one she can trust and share her feelings, get support mentally, self-positive affirmations, definitely. New connection in a country, routine, asking for help, yes. Look for a new support group, journaling, talking to a friend, finding a local support group, definitely. Accepting herself and the situation she's facing.
Working at
Sorry, is someone trying to speak? Kanvi wrote self-reflection. Yes, definitely reflecting on what's causing her that feeling of grief, what's causing her that feeling of sadness, and communication with parents, setting boundaries, finding a support system, journaling and planning to blend in with new routines. Journaling, maybe getting a pet if she can definitely afford it, then yeah, having that sense of companion with the pet can also be very helpful. So yes, most of you have kind of gone through it all, but definitely having a routine because she's in a new country, so kind of building a new routine, exploring new places and talking out with her friends, strong self-esteem and affirmation, definitely. So finding a suitable job, distracting herself, again, trying to that could definitely help. But also maybe if she has any hobbies, trying to find a support group or finding a group of people who are also into those hobbies. So she has a night, she can have people who are like-minded and help her kind of go through that. Building emotional bonds, definitely. These are all great answers. You kind of gotten the crux of what this workshop was all about, and that's great. So now it's time for the takeaway activity. So our takeaway activity for today is creating a personal support map. Basically, a personal support map is just kind of a drawing or even just a list of people that you feel like you can turn to whenever you're dealing with any type of distressing emotions pertaining to grief and even other than grief. So when we make a personal support map, we can kind of look into 3 types of support systems that we have. So the first is practical support. So practical support is anybody that you would go to get reliable and accurate information. So if I take an example of like a school setting, so if you had those classmates that you would go to and ask them about what the homework was, or if they made notes for a particular subject, you may not have had more of a relationship with them beyond that, but you would always go to them to find out what the homework was, what the teacher taught yesterday, if there were any notes that you can borrow. Then emotional support, basically people who you can vent out your feelings to in a comfortable and safe way, people who are willing to listen to you and support you emotionally. So it can be a family member, it can be your best friend. And then social support. Social support is people that you like to hang out with, people who you can go to whenever you want to go out somewhere, go to a movie, go to a new restaurant. That those people will always kind of be there and go and be willing to do those activities with you. So there can be people who fall into multiple categories and you can add them like that. And there might be people who just fit in a distinct category and you can add them like that. Or some people who might be emotional and social support, or someone who is practical and emotional support, they can be in various ways. So you can try to sit down and identify who is that for you in this case. So you can include parents, siblings, close friends. Even if you go to therapy, if you have a counselor, then you can add them. If you have a place of worship, that could be a place where you go for more emotional support, a health clinic, etc. Any type of interaction that you have in your life, all the people that you meet, you can kind of just make a list of who to go to and when you can go to them, so that later on, if you're feeling negative emotions pertaining to grief or any other negative emotions, and you want to talk to someone and you don't really know who to, you have that list to kind of support you and help you understand that you're not really alone in all of this, and that there are people who are willing to help you if you just approach them. So a quick summary. Hidden grief refers to grief which we are unable to mourn openly. It can lead to physical, psychological, behavioral issues in an individual. Guilt can be a major hindrance in the process of grieving. There is no fixed timeline for grieving. The normal stages of grieving include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And ways to cope with this include journaling, creating a ritual, seeking professional help, routines, etc. This is just a quick message from MindTribe about the counseling that we offer. This page also has our email and WhatsApp. You can reach out to us if you are interested in availing our services. I'll just leave the slide on for a minute if you want to note down the email or the number. And once you're done, you can give me a thumbs up and I'll just move on. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. This brings us to the end of the workshop. Thank you for listening and participating. If you have any questions or comments, you can please ask. You can unmute yourself. You can put it on the chat box. And if you don't, you can drop off now. Thank you once again for joining. And I that this was helpful to you in some way.